TCI is brought to you by Escandarea standing at TaylorMade Stallions. Relive his dominant 9 3/4 length win in the Grade 1 Wood Memorial at eskyonthego.com.
Welcome back to TCI, your inside track to the Triple Crown. Alongside Joel Cunningham, I'm John Siegel. Joel, we have two races to talk about this weekend. Both of those are worth 50 points, but we need to talk about the Gotham first. You know, I'd love to show the replay of this race, but unfortunately we can't show any of the New York replays. This is twice now. We saw it in the Withers, and now we see it in the Gotham that we really wanted to show these stretch runs. If you haven't seen a stretch run, log on to twinspires.com. Yep. You have to see this. Joel, tell me about Vyjack. They break him out of the gate, and they have him rate. I mean, I was like, what are they doing? At the top of the stretch, I was very concerned.
Yeah, it's sort of counterintuitive to take a horse who showed that his weapon is clearly speed, to take that away from him, John. But they clearly wanted to give this horse an education. They moved to jockey Joel Rosario, and I talked to trainer Rudy Rodriguez last week, John, and he was really excited about this colt's opportunity to get around two turns. He's a big colt. He had a lot of faith in his colt this past weekend, said he'd been training very well, and it's very clear that they wanted to take a hold of him early, try to have him produce a late run around two turns to show another dimension, because going forward, he's going to have to show that dimension, right, John, let's be honest, to be a real player in the Kentucky Derby picture. So in terms of being impressed with him visually, it was one of the more impressive Derby preps we've seen this year. I mean, from the 16th pole to the wire, when he swapped over to his right lead, John, the way he accelerated away from that field, it was visually impressive. But again, what was he running away from in that race? We know he likes the inner track at Aqueduct. Rodriguez has a lot of success there. I still question that pedigree, John. Again, going forward, you know, to a mile and eighth, mile and a quarter was really where it's going to be tested, in my opinion, and taking his game on the road to Churchill Downs. I think that's going to be a challenge for Vyjack.
All right, so the horse is undefeated. He shows another dimension, a dimension that you say he's going to need to be in the Derby. Yeah. But, Joel, I'm looking here on TCI Top 10. I notice he still does not make the list.
No, I like my list. And, again, it's a projection, so I'm not making any changes yet. Vyjack is probably right on the fringe, John. Again, from a talent perspective, and the dimension that he showed, to be able to rate, you have to be excited about his future. But again, I can't get past the pedigree right now. And what's interesting is we have another son of Into Mischief in our top 10 running this weekend. That's Goldencents. I think Goldencents has a little more stamina in his female family to maybe take him a little further than Vyjack. So I'm going to keep him in there right now. We'll see what happens this weekend. But what's interesting about these races at Aqueduct, John, we've seen it now twice where you had, you know, sort of ordinary, modest pace, you know, which is, to say the least. Right. And then you had the best horse clearly in the race, Revolutionary in the Withers, and Vyjack now coming from well off the pace and just blowing the field away in the stretch run with a visually impressive performance. I think Revolutionary, though, has that 10-furlong pedigree. Vyjack, not sold.
All right, well, let's talk about this weekend's races because, like I said, we have two races, 50 points up for grabs again. Let's start off in California in the San Felipe. We see Flashback in here and also Goldencents, a horse that you just mentioned. Two horses with a lot of speed. Tell me, what do you think about this race?
You know, I think it's a very important race, simply because Flashback's number one on our TCI Top 10, John. Here's a colt that we talked about how visually impressive his maiden win was for Bob Baffert, really validated the buzz behind him, and I think he has the looks and the pedigree of a colt that could be a classic colt. That's why we have him number one. Right. But I think this could be a tricky race for him because he breaks down on the inside in the two-hole. He's given 3 pounds to Goldencents. I don't think that's that big of a deal. I do think it's a two-horse race between those two. But the fact that Goldencents has more tactical speed than I think Flashback has over a track in Santa Anita, where I think he's going to be more forwardly placed in a stalking position. I could see Bob Baffert, you know, sending Carving from the rail in here, and then you got a lot of horses stretching out. Saludos Amigos is a very fast horse, John. I see him going to lead from the outside. I mean, he's a sprinter speed kind of horse. I don't see him stretching out, but I see him going to lead in here for Eric Guillot. So I think there's going to be a lot more speed in this race. Certainly a lot different type of makeup of a race than the Bob Lewis was. So Flashback, he could get pinched back on the inside. I think he's going to take some dirt. We're going to learn a lot about Flashback in here. It's going to be a good education because I think he's going to have to come around Goldencents and catch him in the stretch. Can he do that? I think he can, but it's going to be a good education.
All right, let's go now to South Florida. We're going to talk the Tampa Bay Derby. Joel, there's a horse here in Verrazano. Man, he has all the buzz right now, but you think this race may be a challenge for him?
Well, that's why I think this race is so important. We talked about Flashback. Can he validate the number one rank? And Verrazano, let's be honest, is a colt that has the talent to ascend to the number one rank. If he were to prove that, he can do what he did around one turn, going 2 turns. We're going to find out this weekend. Now, I think a mile and a 16th won't be a big challenge for him at a middle distance. I do think the track could, and again, the makeup of this race, there's a lot of sprinter speed and quality sprinter speed stretching out first time around 2 turns. I think that could give Verrazano some problems, especially over a quirky track that sometimes doesn't play favorably to outsiders. We've seen the problems in the past, John. We saw champion Warpass bring his game to the Tampa Bay Derby. Very similar horse as Verrazano. Warpass, a champion, John. He was basically eased across the wire because he didn't handle the surface, and he was odds on that day. So I don't think Verrazano is an absolute lock in here because that surface is tricky. And again, he's going to face a lot of good competitive early speed in this race. Be interested to see how he handles that quick pace scenario in his first test around 2 turns over a quirky track. I do think Dynamic Sky, if he ever wakes up, runs a straight path, and really lays down in the stretch, he has that talent and upside, John, to pull the upset in here if Verrazano doesn't handle the surface.
All right, looks like we'll get a lot of questions answered for a lot of horses, even in our top 5 this weekend. It's going to be an exciting weekend.
Big for 2 reasons. Again, Verrazano, can he go 2 turns against this type of competition? Can he finish around 2 turns like he did against around 1 turn, John? And then obviously Flashback and Goldencents. How good are those 2, and how much better is one than the other? I really like Flashback in that race. I think he's going to prove to be number 1.
All right, thank you, Joel. Thank you guys for watching. As always, you can play these races at twinspires.com. Thank you for watching. Make sure you come back next week. We'll recap these races and have a preview of the Gotham.